You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Mimecast. You're wondering if you need more email and collaboration security, because, as it turns out, just protecting your workspace with M365 isn't good enough. You just watched your entire company grind to a screeching halt, all because someone opened a phishing email. Next time, don't rely on one-size-fits-all security. Protect your inbox with Mimecast and diversify your security stack. For a free trial, go to mimecast.com and keep your business from, falling apart. North Korea's APT-37 deploys FadeStealer to steal information from its targets. Apple patches vulnerabilities under active exploitation. Access to a U.S. satellite is being hawked in a Russophone cybercrime forum. Russian hacktivist auxiliaries say they've disrupted ifc.org. Unmasking pig butchering scams. Social engineering as a method of account takeover. Fraudsters are seen abusing generative AI. Sergey Medved from Quest Software describes the great cloud repatriation. Mark Ryland of AWS speaks with Rick Howard about software-defined perimeters. And embedded URLs in malware. I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire Intel briefing for Thursday, June 22nd, 2023. On Labs describes a cyber espionage campaign by North Korea's APT-37, which deploys a new information gathering tool, FadeStealer, against its target. The gang's scope seems to cover surveillance of individuals in South Korea whom Pyongyang regards as actually or potentially hostile, North Korean defectors, human rights activists, and university professors. The gang, known also by names that include Starcraft, Reaper, and RedEyes, begins their attack with a spear-phishing email baited with a password-protected document. Executing the included CHM file also executes PowerShell malware that installs a backdoor. An auto-run registry key enables the malware to maintain persistence. The next stage involves the installation of a second backdoor, AblyGo backdoor, which, as its name suggests, exploits the legitimate Golang-based Ably platform. AblyGo enables subsequent privilege escalation, exfiltration, and malware installation. FadeStealer includes eavesdropping functionality, taking control of the affected device's microphone to collect ambient speech and other sounds. Apple has patched 2 security flaws that were used in hacks against thousands of Russian devices, the Washington Post reports. Russia's Federal Security Service, also known as the FSB, has attributed this campaign to the United States National Security Agency, but there's no evidence of NSA's involvement apart from the FSB's accusation. The FSB itself has refrained from explaining how they reached their conclusion. An Apple spokesperson told Cyberscoop that the company has never worked with any government to insert a backdoor into any Apple product and never will. In its security update, Apple says the hack allowed for the execution of arbitrary code with kernel privileges. Sophos writes that the 2 vulnerabilities have been patched in Apple's latest update on all devices, with the possible exception of tvOS, which the cybersecurity firm says may just have yet to receive an update. It is strongly advised that those with Apple devices update as soon as possible. HackRead reports that a Russian-speaking hacker is offering access to a Maxar Technologies U.S. military satellite for $15,000. The account posting the offer, Labs666, offers to receive funds through the trusted third-party payment service Escrow. It's difficult to know what to make of the claim, which seems a little excessive for credibility. Russian website dzen.ru reported that the so-called Darknet Parliament, composed of Killnet, Anonymous Sudan, and R-Evil, claims to have taken down the International Finance Corporation's website, ifc.org. The attack started yesterday morning, and the hacktivist auxiliaries called the DDoS attack just the beginning. The Telegram pages for the associated groups are notably light on the usual updates regarding their cyber activities, with Killnet posting a statement that is unusually modest of the group, saying that, unfortunately, IFC is no longer working, says Killnet. The claims await confirmation. It's worth noting that dzen.ru is clearly editorially on the side of the Russian hacktivist auxiliaries. The outlet refers to the groups as Our Valiant Anonymous Sudan and Killnet, lending more circumstantial credibility to the conclusion that Anonymous Sudan is a Russian front group. Krebs Security has described in detail Cryptor.biz, one of the more popular crypting services available to the criminal underworld. Crypting, Krebs Security explains, is disguising or crypting your malware so that it appears benign to antivirus and security products. Cryptor.biz is a tried-and-true crypting service recommended by FadeStealer and Vidar as one of the more reliable places a criminal can go to get malware crypted. Krebs Security tracks email addresses involved with Cryptor.biz and links these in turn to usernames and websites associated with a particular individual. As Krebs Security puts it, it makes a lot of sense for cybersecurity researchers and law enforcement alike to focus attention on the top players in the crypting space for several reasons. The most critical reason, Krebs writes, is that the threat actors recommending the use of the cryptor tend to be among the most experienced and connected malicious coders on the planet. Trend Micro has published a report with their latest take on pig butchering, a type of cryptocurrency scam in which victims are tricked into investing in fraudulent cryptocurrencies. The flow of a pig butchering scam begins with the addition of potential victims to a fake chat group on investing. The firm writes that if a victim shows interest in investing, the conversation evolves into a one-on-one chat. From there, the victim is introduced to a fake brokerage service and prompted to transfer funds to its website. This cycle repeats itself as new victims find their place in the grasp of the malicious actor. The researchers determined that one group of pig butchering scammers made nearly $4 million between January and March of 2023. Avanan outlines a social engineering attack in which threat actors compromise a victim's work email account and use the account to request a payroll information change. This specific attack sees threat actors posing as company employees reaching out to their respective HR departments, requesting a change in the bank account associated with their direct deposit. Avanan notes that people change banks all the time. Sometimes people want the money split into multiple accounts. Whatever it is, it's not unusual to receive this sort of request. SIFT has released its second quarter of 2023 Digital Trust and Safety Index, focused on fighting fraud in the age of AI automation and discussing the use of generative AI in social engineering schemes and the fears from consumers surrounding the new technology. The fears aren't entirely groundless. SIFT writes that within the last 6 months, 68% of consumers noticed an increase in the frequency of spam and scams, likely driven by the surge in AI-generated content. The company's data also shows a 40% jump in blocked fraudulent content from 2022 to the first quarter of 2023. This increase is anticipated to continue into the future. The threat associated with AI is that it lowers the barrier to entry for fraud and social engineering scams. There's an easy plausibility to the language it generates that outdoes the text non-native or even less gifted native speakers produce. And finally, cybersecurity firm Cofense has found that compromised domains make up over half of embedded URLs used to deliver malware. Compromised domains, the firm says, are accessible by actors of varying skill levels, are effective at bypassing secure email gateways, and are somewhat effective at fooling potential victims. Abused domains, such as those using Google Docs or Microsoft OneDrive, made up 37% of embedded URLs. These domains are highly effective but short-lived due to quick detection by the hosting services. Domains that were created by the threat actors themselves accounted for just 11% of embedded URLs. The researchers note that created domains are typically used by more advanced threat actors, are not highly effective at bypassing secure email gateways, and are highly effective at tricking victims. So make sure that the website you're using to buy your newest swimsuit for the summer will only take your money and not any of your sensitive data. Actually, receiving the swimsuit would be nice too. Coming up after the break, Sergey Medved from Quest Software describes the great cloud repatriation. Mark Ryland from AWS speaks with Rick Howard about software-defined perimeters. Stay with us. And now, a word from our sponsor, KnowBe4. It's all connected, and we're not talking conspiracy theories. When it comes to InfoSec tools, effective integrations can make or break your security stack. The same should be true for security awareness training. KnowBe4, provider of the world's largest library of security awareness training, provides a way to integrate your existing security stack tools to help you strengthen your organization's security culture. KnowBe4's Security Coach uses standard APIs to quickly and easily integrate with your existing security products from vendors like Microsoft, CrowdStrike, and Cisco, 35 vendor integrations and counting. Security Coach analyzes your security stack alerts to identify events related to any risky security behavior from your users. Use this information to set up real-time coaching campaigns targeting risky users based on those events from your network, endpoint, identity, or web security vendors. Then coach your users at the moment the risky behavior occurs, with contextual security tips delivered via Microsoft Teams, Slack, or email. Learn more at knowbe4.com/securitycoach. That's knowbe4.com/securitycoach. And we thank KnowBe4 for sponsoring our show. Struggling to secure on-prem apps with modern identity? Don't worry, you're not alone. Join industry leaders from Fortune 500 organizations to secure your apps on any cloud with any IDP, regardless of your environment's complexity. Meet Strata's identity orchestration platform, Mavericks. Say goodbye to the headaches of app refactoring and legacy tech debt. With identity orchestration, you can modernize legacy apps to use MFA or passwordless authentication in a few weeks, migrate from one IDP to another, and so much more without changing the app. No matter your IAM use case, Strata extends the value of your current identity investments. And the best part? You can try it for free today. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to share your biggest identity challenge, and they'll hook you up with a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Visit strata.io/cyberwire. That's strata.io/cyberwire. Sergey Medved is VP of Product Management at Quest Software, provider of cloud management services, among other offerings. I spoke with him about a trend he and his colleagues are tracking of clients moving some critical assets back on-prem, what some are calling the Great Cloud Repatriation.
A lot of companies are evaluating costs. A lot of companies are evaluating their security posture. And this IT environment is a living organism in a sense that things are changing every year. And so that naturally is putting some CISOs and CIOs into a spot where they're starting to look at their cloud strategies and reevaluate them.
Can you give us some specific examples of some of the things that are making CISOs take a closer look at this?
Yeah, the biggest trend, I think, several years ago was obviously security. So a lot of public cloud providers either did not have the capabilities to support the latest regulatory requirements, for example, HIPAA or country-specific data storage rules. That has changed, right? And so I think we're now seeing a shift towards cost, where, again, the CIOs, and very often it's a board conversation as well, are realizing that a lot of the applications that they migrated into the cloud in the past, maybe some of them don't really necessarily have to be there. And that's taking a toll on both the cost side of the things, but also on the user experience, because we're seeing more and more of those hybrid environments where your data perhaps is on-premise and some of the applications are running in the cloud. And so there is obviously this data latency issue, but also, as I said, cost. The cloud provider cost has been fairly flat relatively in the last several years, but the cost of buying servers or real estate in data centers or power supplies has been trending down steadily in the last decade or so. And so again, if you're in the CIO position, if you look at it, you start to reevaluating and realizing that in many cases it may be more cost efficient for you to run your workloads, some of the workloads on premise.
What are some of the specific types of data that folks are finding they want to pull back to be on-prem?
Well, when it comes to regulation, right? It's anything that's HIPAA compliant, for example, data, or PCI, right? Payments-related data. That's pretty clear. For a lot of non-regulated industries, so outside maybe of finance and healthcare, we're seeing a lot of intellectual property data or sensitive data that customers are starting to look to move into their private clouds or on-prem, right? If you are, for example, BMW or another big major company where 20 or 50 years ago your competitive position was how quickly you could produce cars and put them in hands of the customers. Now it's more about the innovation that you're doing at your company, right? So every manufacturing company these days is a technology company, and so technology is all about data. So you need to be looking at which data is truly the core of your business and which data you want to protect. And so that can be anything around the intellectual property, the designs, maybe if you're a car manufacturer, or if you're a services provider, it can be your customer data as well.
Is there a concern about added complexity here when you're running a hybrid operation?
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, you're balancing between cost and customer experience. Because if you just go and you try to reduce cost, and that's your primary goal and objective, then you probably would end up with an on-prem data center somewhere. But at the end of the day, your customer experience is also equally important, whether it's your external customer or you're serving your internal customers, your employees, say it's an HR system or whatnot. And so we're doing software development. And so for the CIOs, it's a balancing act. It's making sure that the applications that whether you put them into the cloud or they're on premise, the latency of those applications is acceptable. The data is flowing quickly between them. You're not suffering from outages, because if you put data in or your applications between the cloud, hybrid environment cloud, and on-prem, you're just expanding both the attack surface from a cybersecurity standpoint, but you're also expanding your sort of the weak spots of your architecture or the points of failure.
Do you suppose we'll see some ebb and flow with this between the cloud providers and the on-prem providers? I could imagine a waves back and forth of, as cloud got more popular, then the on-prem got less expensive because it wasn't as much in demand. But now if we're swinging back to on-prem, maybe the demand makes that a little more expensive and cloud prices go down. Do you think there's anything to that line of thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, it's ebbs and flows. Again, with hyperscalers in the past, they've taken steps to meet government and industry requirements. So specific cloud services are now available from major players, available for classified data, HIPAA compliance, government data, country-specific requirements, especially in some Asian countries and in Europe. And this allows for many of the businesses to, again, reconsider moving data back into the cloud in some cases, right? Storing your backups, for example, is a good example. Very often, in the past, the companies kind of flocked to the cloud, then they realized that there is a risk of misconfiguration in the cloud, right? Something that would place your data, your backups in the cloud at risk. They moved it to on-premise, to their private clouds and private environments. Now, again, they're starting to look back at the cloud offerings because Azure, Microsoft, and AWS, Amazon, and Google have stepped up their game and offering net new capabilities that allow customers to store their data in sort of an immutable way.
What are your recommendations for people to come at this, to be able to properly set their priorities and balance their approach here?
It's all about planning at the end of the day. Large companies like Gartner and Forrester are doing a lot of advisory in this space, and I think Gartner even has a market guide for it. But at the end of the day, again, without purpose of planning, the cloud can be more expensive. It can be less secure. So that's the result. The cloud repatriation is the result of it. So proper road mapping for the workloads, proper planning for migrations when companies move their data, whether it's on-premise or to the cloud. That's a key component of making sure that the future workloads and the data are both secure and delivering on the promise of the customer experience and cost.
That's Sergey Medved from Quest Software. In our continuing series of interviews, my CyberWire colleague Rick Howard gathered at the recent AWS Reinforce conference, Rick checks in with Mark Ryland of AWS. The topic of their conversation is software-defined perimeters.
The CyberWire is an Amazon Web Services media partner, and in June 2023, Jen Iben, the CyberWire senior producer, and I traveled to the magical world of Disneyland in Anaheim, California, to attend their AWS Reinforce conference and talk with senior leaders about the latest developments in securing the Amazon cloud. I got to sit down with Mark Ryland, the director of the Office of the Chief Information Security Officer at AWS, to talk about Amazon's version of a software-defined perimeter, a concept that I've been talking about for a few years now that can greatly enhance any organization's zero-trust journey. Amazon calls their version verified access, coupled with a specially designed open-source authorization language that they call CEDAR.
There's a number of use cases that when we think about zero trust, we kind of break it into sort of three general use cases. One is human access to applications. Another is software-to-software scenarios, where, again, you want even your software to be validated each time it calls in, say, another microservice. And then there's another kind of broad category that we can think of as either IoT or industrial IoT, or kind of that whole topic of, again, it's a software-to-software scenario, but it's often involving things like factory floor operations, smart highways, smart buildings, all that kind of part, and that also is considered, broadly speaking, one of the primary use cases. So, in that first use case, which is a very common one and one with a lot of focus, is I have human users. They need to access applications, typically like enterprise apps. And historically, we would do that with VPN technology, right? So you log into a VPN, now I'm inside the CorpNet, and now I have the same access as I was on the physical network. But again, often that access is very broad and very maybe inappropriately broad. And so,
in hindsight, it's ridiculous that we did it that way, right?
That's right. Although we do have in our principal engineering community at Amazon, we have a tenet which is respect what went before. So you have to understand there were probably reasons that made sense at the time. But in any case, you're right. And so what verified access does is it gives you that, think of it as a smart proxy capability that you come with your identity. So you use your SAML token or your OIDC token that you got from Okta or Azure AD or some identity provider, and you show up at this edge capability and say, hey, I want to access this enterprise application. And there we run a series of security checks on each and every request. So again, it's this constantly being verified. things like device health, network location, all these different parameters, identity, the claims that come in through the identity provider, augmenting those claims with other kinds of trust signals. And then we run the Cedar policy, and Cedar is a very exciting launch as well. This
goes hand in hand,
this week, which is we're both using it inside our services, but also open sourcing the language and the runtime so that anyone can use it, which is a very optimized authorization language. And the Cedar policy then will tell you, and that's kind of the security team has decided from under what circumstances can users, if you have an MFA, you can do certain things. If you don't, there's other things you could do. You make those initial kind of high-level authorization decisions. Then you pass the identity claims back to the back-end application, which then kind of runs as it did before, say as if you'd VPN'd in. Now, over time, we expect that customers will begin to externalize authorization decisions of their apps also using Cedar and another service we launched, which we call verified permissions. So you can think of verified permissions as a service where if I'm writing or rewriting an enterprise app, I will externalize authorization from my business logic. Take it out of my business logic. That's not where it belongs. It should be in a system designed specifically for permissioning. And AVP, Amazon Verified Permissions, is that service. Again, it's a Cedar language, central control of your policies and management of policies, but the business logic is no longer the authorization is no longer embedded in business logic, which is a much better way to build enterprise apps.
So let me try to summarize what Cedar is. It's a programming language designed specifically to handle IAM functions, right? And doesn't do anything else. It's just, Mark is authorized to get to this workforce and Rick isn't, kind of things, right?
And you might ask a reasonable question, do we need to invent another one? There are a couple of them out there.
Yeah.
You and I have a little bit of gray hair, so we remember Zacamol, which has been around for ages. Yeah. And more recently, the OPA, Open Policy Agent, has a language called Rego. We looked hard at those. We didn't really want to invent something new, but we decided this was such an important area, and for very specific reasons, those just didn't really meet the requirements. We also have the third thing option, right? We have an IAM policy language for our APIs, and that was another option. But looking at all those options, and we made a very strategic decision that this is so important that we really have to build a very optimized language, optimized in a couple of ways. Number one, the language itself has got to be expressive and easy to read, but not too expressive, because if you give someone kind of a Turing-complete language, you can write things like loops that never end.
Yeah. Which I've done many times, in my younger days.
Yes, and so you have to be able to prove that these are programs that will stop executing at some point, and if they won't, then you reject them in your language verification. And that's the other key point, is that the team that built this was half software engineers with expertise in authorization systems, and it was half formal verification computer scientists, people that do this kind of automated reasoning, we call it, or formal verification, applying their expertise to both the design of the language so that the language itself can be the intent you express can be formally verified as you essentially upload it, and reject it if it for some reason doesn't have the proper computational constraints. But the implementation of the language is also formally verified. So every time we do a code check-in or a build of this new feature or whatever, then there's a bunch of formal verification proofs that run against every single code change. So we've used it both to increase the certainty of the correctness of our implementation, but also the design of the Cedar language was heavily influenced by the need of formal verification. So that makes it, I think, quite unique.
So the Cedar language in, what was the name of the product again?
Verified Access.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's only for Amazon right now. Are you guys looking over the horizon so you might be able to use the same ideas for other kinds of services?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's already seeing uptake in the open source community, where there's a couple of ISVs out there that already have adopted it for their kind of authorization as a service systems that they have in market. And that's very exciting to see. And we hope customers use it internally, even if you don't use our cloud service. Just use this very high quality, very carefully engineered open source language and set of libraries and tests and proofs and so forth that you can just build right into your application if you want to do that. So we're very excited about kind of helping the industry to solve a problem. One other thing I'll mention is that there's been this long-going debate about role-based access control versus attribute-based access control, and Cedar was designed very consciously to support both models very well.
It's not an either or. Come
Yes,
on.
exactly.
Just do what you got to do.
Yeah.
That's Mark Ryland from AWS speaking with the CyberWire's Rick Howard. Tired of cybersecurity mega conferences? MWise is different. With a focused agenda and targeted problem solving, MWise is where security's best go to get better. From September 18th through the 20th in Washington, D.C., you'll join a special community of security's sharpest minds, hear perspectives you might not get anywhere else, and reach a new level of mastery that'll prepare you for what's next. Register early and save at mwise.mandiant.com/conf23. That's mwise.mandiant.com/CONF23. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. You can email us at cyberwire@n2k.com. Your feedback helps us ensure we're delivering the information and insights that help keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like the CyberWire are part of the daily intelligence routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, as well as the critical security teams supporting the Fortune 500 and many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show was written by Rachel Gelfand. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from FadeStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. Hello, listeners. We're always looking for ways to improve the CyberWire network to give you an intelligence-driven news experience that saves you time and keeps you in the know on the latest developments in cybersecurity. We'd like to hear your feedback in our 2023 audience survey. Complete this survey for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Visit thecyberwire.com/survey. That's thecyberwire.com/survey and share your feedback. Thanks.